Welcome to the All About You podcast. And today my guest is Vicki, and Vicki is a teacher of English and Spanish. So we are going to be delving into the world of language learning. Vicki, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Sheila.
Now, I'm really interested in this conversation because I'm originally from the UK, living in Spain. So I'm a student of Spanish. So really, before we go on to the language learning, you're not Spanish. Where did you come from originally and why did you come to Spain?
Right, okay. Well, I'm originally from Manchester. I was born in Manchester and I lived there till I was in my sort of mid to late 20s. And then I transferred with the job I was in at the time, which was in a bookmaker's, a betting shop, a manageress of a betting shop, believe it or not, so quite different. I transferred to Reading, to the south of England. I lived there for 8 years, and then basically the reason I came to Spain is very complicated, but more or less because of a friend that I met while I was in Reading, and I have written. It's a very complicated story. People quite often ask me, "Why did you come to Spain?" And I can't think of one easy way to say, you know, like some people will say, oh, well, to retire here, or I like the weather, or I have family here. I haven't got one reason like that, you know, so there's so many reasons that all built up. So I actually did write a book about the reasons why I came to Spain, which is called Confessions of a Spanish Teacher. And that tells the story, because sometimes when I try and think about how did it start, I think it started even way before I went to Reading. I've always wanted to live abroad ever since I was a little girl. I used to say to my dad, oh, I'm going to live abroad one day. And I don't know why, or nobody else in my family has ever lived abroad. Even now they haven't, you know, so it was like just something that I always wanted to do. And then various things happened, many things. And, you know, sometimes in life you feel like you're being guided in a particular direction, don't you? So I came here for a month's holiday with my son, who was 9 months old at the time. So I had a baby, came here for a 9 months, for a 1 month holiday, and I just never went back. I'm still here. And he's 26.
Wow, so that is some story then. So you came for a week's holiday with a very young baby and just stayed.
Yeah. I stayed a month, then I thought, oh, I'll stay another month, and then I stayed another month, and the next thing he was at school, you know, and the next thing I was working, and then the next thing, you know, 25 years went past.
Wow. Well, we'll put a link to your Confessions of a Spanish Teacher book with the podcast.
Oh, thank you. That's great. Yeah. So it's just the story really of not only coming here and then some experiences here, you know, which hopefully are quite entertaining.
So you decided to become a language teacher. So you teach English and Spanish. So how did that come about, Vicki?
Well, again, like most things that, you know, I'm not one of, you know, some people in life always have their lives planned out and decide what they're, well, I say unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you look at it. I don't think that's ever really happened to me. When I came here, I was an English teacher. I was teaching English, so I didn't know any Spanish, so I couldn't teach Spanish. And then after being here for 2 years, maybe a little bit more than that, maybe 3 years, after I felt like I'd got enough. Well, to be honest, teaching Spanish was a little bit of an accident, because what happened was, as my Spanish got better, because I was on a mission to learn Spanish, I knew, especially having a young son, I just couldn't live here if I didn't speak Spanish. It was impossible, you know. So I set out on a mission to learn Spanish, and as my Spanish got better, then sort of people, friends, etc., would say to me, oh, can you teach us a little bit of Spanish? You know, that's basically how the Spanish thing started. And I would start just teaching beginners, you know, the basics. And then as time went on, then I started, I was working in an academy at the time, teaching English. And I used to just teach Spanish to friends and what in my spare time. And then what happened? Ah, that's right. I left that job for what I thought was a better job. Anyone who's ever lived in Spain will know it's very difficult to find good work in Spain. And I left it in the hopes of getting a better job, which turned out to be a nightmare job. And so I was thinking I'd have to go back to this academy, which was nice. I enjoyed it, but it was very low wages and long hours. And a friend of mine said to me, why don't you teach for yourself? Why don't you start doing classes yourself? Why go and work for somebody else? And I don't come from a family where anyone was self-employed. You know, the thought of being self-employed was terrifying to me. I was like, oh no, I couldn't do that. And then we sat down and worked out how many students I would need to earn the same, you know, that I was earning at this academy. And it wasn't many, because I think I was on about €2 an hour at the time. I mean, it was a really low wage. And so I put an advert in the local paper and just sort of, I'll see how it goes, see what happens. And yeah, it just started from there, really. I started off teaching in people's houses, you know, just going around and tutoring in people's houses. And then within 6 months, I had enough students. Again, this is in the Confessions of a Spanish Teacher book. I ended up renting a locale along with somebody else who was teaching computers, informatica, and we opened up a sort of a school together, if you like, where he was teaching computers and I was teaching Spanish. And then eventually he got fed up of teaching and he left. And it was just me. So, yeah, it was, again, like a bit of it's like I fell into it, if you like. But I think when something's right, things just happen, don't they? It's like when you try to do something that perhaps is not right for you, you feel like you've got all obstacles in the way. And to me, I always felt like you should take the path that opens out in front of you, and that's basically what happened.
So Vicki, you have students that are children, teenagers and adults.
I do, mainly adults now. I have taught a lot of children over the years, especially when my son was young, because, you know, that would sort of fit in with like schools being open, etc., and childcare for him, etc. Now, I do still teach children, but it's only private. I don't do groups of children now. I mean, I've done summer schools. I've taught, lots of teenagers. But probably nowadays, it's mainly adults that I teach. Yeah.
I think one of the things when you're learning another language, children are like sponges.
Yeah.
They seem to have this gift of absorbing the language. They don't worry about the grammar. They don't worry about pronunciation, and they seem to have a much better time of it. I particularly wanted to talk to you about, as an adult, learning another language.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a student of Spanish myself, have been and will be, as far as I'm concerned, for the rest of my life. And every day is a school day. You know, you learn something new every day.
Yeah, that's right. Even me, I'm always learning new Spanish words.
So can you just talk a little bit about some of the problems students have as an adult when they're trying to learn Spanish, and how you can help overcome that? Because I think one of the big things I have found is, A, we don't allow ourselves to be a beginner.
Yeah, yeah.
Number two, we've very much got the fear. Oh, I can't, you know, try this sentence because they'll think I'm stupid, because I'm an adult, I should get it straight away. So can we just talk about some of your experiences of working with adult learners?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The thing with children is they don't question anything. You know, if you say something to them, they don't say, oh, why do they say it like that? And why don't they say it like we do? You know, that's what adults do, because obviously for adults, their own language is more firmly entrenched. You know, children, their brains are still growing, and there is a part of your brain that deals with languages, and if it's not activated when you're young, it makes it more difficult later on. But sometimes people say it's not an age thing, it's how this part of your brain has been activated, because I have lots of adult students of different nationalities, not only British people learning Spanish, but lots of European people, French, Swedish. I've got an Estonian lady at the moment, a German lady, I've got Hungarian students, Belgian students. They all tend to do a bit better than British students, because unfortunately for us, well, fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, of course, English is spoken everywhere you go. So we're a bit lazy with languages, I think. And also, I think in Britain, languages aren't valued as much as they are in other countries. I know when I was at school, I was really good at languages. But nobody ever said to me, oh, that, you know, it was more like, well, are you any good at maths? You know, or can you do, it's like the languages that I spoke, you know, I don't think that was really encouraged, because I don't think they really, like my parents, for example, you know, and I'm not blaming them. I think they didn't really think, well, what will you do with that language? You know, like it wasn't as valuable as other things. So I think that what happens sometimes with adults is, especially if they've not learned another language before, if they've learned another language before, they know a little bit about the grammar already. Their minds are more open to different ways of saying things. You know, I think that's the problem, because people, adults, are so entrenched in, we say it like this, and they'll say, oh, why do Spanish people say it the wrong way round? Well, who says it's the wrong way round? You know, it's like, it's just a different way round. So I think once people can open the mind a little bit like that and just accept, sometimes you just have to accept it. I think why people come to me for their classes and like my classes is because I give explanations in English as simply as possible, because I've had to learn Spanish, so I know everybody has the same problems. I know when I get to a point in my book where it's the pronouns, or we're coming into the past tenses, or I know people are going to struggle with that, because everybody does. It's always the same things that people get stuck on. So I think what I try and do is to try and explain it as clearly and simply as possible. Sometimes there is an explanation. Sometimes there is no explanation. You just have to say, that's just the way they say it. You know, you've just got to accept it. And something quite interestingly that I found with students is, if somebody's very good with maths, or with computers, or things that are logical, that have a pattern, they struggle more with languages, because with languages you can't always find a sequence or you know, that logical reasoning that these people who are more maybe mathematically minded are looking for. So I try and give them that. I think my method is structured. This is what people tell me. It's structured, it builds bit by bit. It starts off very simply, and then, but quite quickly, we do a lot of making questions and putting sentences together. So for me, I try to teach people not phrases, because phrases are just useless really, because if you learn a phrase and then someone says something that's not in your, oh gosh, no, you weren't supposed to say that, you know, because I don't know how to answer that. You've got to know how to answer everything, put the things together yourself. And obviously grammar is important, but I try and teach what I call need to know grammar. You know, my students, they don't want to do a degree in Spanish, they just want to communicate. So they only need the grammar they need you know, they need grammar, but they don't need, you know, the most technical grammar to make a conversation. And everyone's different. I mean, some people come along to me, they do the level 1. That's enough for them. They're happy with that. They can put a basic conversation together. They can order their food. They can go, you know, they feel quite comfortable. They can have basic conversation. Then somebody else will want to go a bit further and go into the level 2. Some people do all, because I have 4 levels at the moment. And there's a level 5 coming out in the new year, which is no more grammar, but it's just really practicing everything that people have learned. Some people go, you know, go all the way through all the books and still carry on maybe with 1 class a week just to keep it all fresh. You know, again, everyone's different like that. And I really believe everyone can learn Spanish. Some people will learn it more quickly than others. And some people, it will take them a little bit longer. But it's like, you know, running a marathon. You run a marathon, you know, one person's going to win and do it in however many minutes or hours, and other people are going to finish maybe a couple of hours behind, but they still finish. I think the important thing is not to compare yourself with other people. That's the other thing that I say to all my students. They all work individually. I no longer do groups where everybody's got to do the same thing. You're all doing the same method, but everyone's at different points in it. And we work in very small groups, so I can just go individually around the students. Because what I've found is groups, even if you have 5 absolute beginners who know nothing, start one day, within 2 weeks, one's, you know, just clicking and getting it all and racing ahead. Another one's doing okay, and one's just really struggling and can't get past page 1. So what happens is the ones that are going really quickly get frustrated because they feel like they're being held back. The ones that are struggling with it get frustrated because they feel like they've got to finish quickly, even though they're not really ready to finish. So quite a few years ago now, I just decided, that's it. I'm going to just let everybody go at their own pace. No one's waiting for someone to finish. No one's sort of speeding up, trying to get through it and feeling silly because they haven't. And that seems to work really well with people. And yeah, I think the most important thing to remember is you're not in competition with anyone else. It's only you. So you've always got to, if you've progressed, you know, if you look back, you might maybe you've done a few classes over a month, and you look back and you think, you must look back at what you've learned and not look forward at what you still don't know, because there'll always be more that you still don't know than there is that you've learned. You know, and that's something people do. Oh, you know, so I was reading this newspaper or whatever, and I didn't know a lot of the words. And it's like, well, read that magazine and see how many words you know, because sometimes, as I say, there'll always be more that you don't know, because learning a language, I mean, it's a huge thing. It's not something that can just be done. So, you know, it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes effort. It doesn't take long to learn some, but, you know, it sort of almost never ends, really. It's like an ongoing project, isn't it? I mean, as I say, I'm always still learning new words, new expressions, and then you've got accents to deal with and idioms to deal with. So if you're not a person who naturally likes languages, it can take quite a lot of effort. But I think, I don't know about you, Sheila, but for me, I remember when I was learning Spanish, that lovely feeling when you did go out and try to do something and you did it. You know, like and it just feels so good because, you know, in the beginning, you can't do anything. That's why I decided to learn, you know, I had to learn Spanish because my son was ill when he was a baby. Just, you know, I mean, as it turned out, it was just, you know, flu probably or something, but I thought he had meningitis. Took him to the health centre. and couldn't understand a word that the nurse was saying to me or the doctor was saying, and it was horrible, you know, and that's when I just decided, that's it, I have to learn. If I'm going to live in Spain, I have to learn Spanish. I can't live here without knowing Spanish. And yeah, it's so as time goes on, you suddenly get a few successes, don't you, here and there, a few conversations, you understand things, and it's a nice feeling, and but it's a gradual feeling. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't just wake up one morning and speak fluent Spanish. And you know, the other thing that I remember that you met, when I didn't think that my Spanish still was very good, because nobody ever thinks their Spanish is very good. Other people will say, oh, their Spanish is really good. And that person will say, oh, their Spanish is really good. But if only they knew both of them are good. But then when you have family out, you know, to visit, or friends, and they don't know any Spanish, I remember one of my nieces saying to me after she'd heard me, I was only ordering probably two dos café con leche or something, and she's like, oh, your Spanish is really good, you know, like, because you forget that even little things that you take for granted, that you think, oh, that's easy. Well, it's not easy for someone who doesn't know anything. So you've got to appreciate your own little successes as well along the way. And a lot of it is confidence, I think, you know. You get quite a few people who are really quite good at Spanish, but they lack a bit of confidence. We try and build on confidence in class, like speaking, when you're in a safe environment where no one's going to laugh at you and no one's going to think you're stupid or whatever. Because I think maybe 50% of it is confidence, because sometimes you hear people who really aren't that good at Spanish, but they've got all this confidence and they all, you know, they just seem to get away with it, or do they? I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if they'll say, oh yeah, you know, I got my point over, and you think, oh, you know, it probably wasn't the right point, but never mind. But yeah, so I think it's confidence, patience, and just, you know, being kind to yourself. And the other thing is, notice when Spanish people speak English, or anyone who speaks to you in English, who's really, well, you would say, oh, their English is really good, but they're not perfect. They don't speak, they don't get every single word right. They don't get every single tense right. They might speak in the past when it should be the present, or they might say to instead of from, or, you know, but you still understand what they're saying. And that's, to me, is what fluency is. It's not saying every word perfectly, because I personally think that's impossible. It's being able to always get over what you want to say, when you want to say it, even if it's not perfect. You know, with your, you might get, and having, if you don't know a word, for example, you don't know a word, instead of sort of freezing, because I think people freeze as well. I think that's the other thing that happens. It's like this rabbit in the headlights, isn't it? And then they can't remember anything. They get a panic because they've forgotten a word, or you talk around it. You know, use the words you do know to get to describe it. I mean, I remember this happened to me particularly. I used to do a lot of interpreting at the police station for people, and that's really quite scary in the beginning, because you know, they're just so forbidding in the beginning until they get to know you. Once they get to know you, they're like really friendly. And I remember I was at the police station with this guy, and he'd had his wheel trims stolen off his car. And I didn't know how to say wheel trims. You know, it's like just not a word that you ever say, is it? So I've got the, you know, the Guardia Civil's like looking at me like they do, sort of thing. And I said, no, you know, those metal things that go on the car tires. And he just said, oh, tapacubos. And I went, oh, yes, that's it, tapacubos. And I still remember that word, even though I've probably never said it since that day, except when I'm actually telling this story. So talk around it. Yeah, use the vocabulary that you've got, and just you get through it. Ask them to slow down, ask them to repeat. Don't be scared of asking that. And in my experience, I don't know about you, but I think in general, Spanish people are very helpful. they don't sort of go, oh, I don't understand, go away. They're very helpful if you're trying to speak to them in Spanish. So what's your experience been of that?
Well, I have to say, I've been nodding my head to absolutely everything you have said. And I think one thing I would like to add to that is my experience of learning Spanish is I have learned the kind of learner I am. I'm a very visual learner.
Yes.
So when you were talking earlier about, we want to, right, just give me the rule or give me the pattern. And that can work to a certain extent, but then there's always exceptions. So for me, I like a YouTube video because I can play it, repeat, repeat, repeat. You have a look around on YouTube, and we'll talk about your channel as well. But, finding a YouTube channel or a Spanish teacher you get on with, I think that's a huge thing, because particularly as an adult learner, you want to feel comfortable that you can practice with your teacher and you're not going to feel embarrassed.
That's right. And you're right. Everybody has a different way of learning. That's exactly right what you say. Find your way that suits you. And what suits someone else won't suit you. I mean, people go through my books and we do a lot of picking out verbs, which people never want to do. So, well, it's funny. Some people really like doing it because they like and then other people, I'll give them a table and they have, it sounds boring, but they have to pick out the verbs out of a text. And some people just won't do it. They don't want to do it. They don't want to pick out the verbs. So I just say, okay, don't do it. Translate the text. I don't try and make somebody do what they don't feel comfortable doing. You've got to find your own way of doing things. Yeah.
So I think, if you are, and we're talking here about people living in Spain, learning Spanish. But there are a lot of people who might be anywhere in the world who want to learn Spanish or learn French or Italian, not living in that country. So the fact that we have things like YouTube videos now, which are completely free, you can watch 24/7. And myself, I look at various Spanish, particularly for grammar. Grammar point, I really don't understand from my book. Okay, let's go on to YouTube. You find a video, find somebody who explains it quite well, maybe with visual prompts or drawings or something. And, maybe 2 or 3 times, right, I've got it now. So then you can go back to your book. And I think it's finding how you learn. And it's like with anything, even in our own language. Somebody to do it, to learn something, somebody wants to listen, somebody needs to write it down, make notes. So I think regardless of what language, regardless of where you are in the world, try and find out how you learn best. Because I think visual, so lists of things, looking for the pattern, use your highlighters, all of that for me is great, because as a visual learner, it works.
That's right.
So I think that is so important. And, it's interesting, people living in different countries, but are learning a language from another country. I think that is phenomenal.
Yeah. No, it is. It's amazing. I mean, that's it. The world's a lot smaller now, isn't it? And, Spanish and one thing I've come to realize since I've been teaching, I've been doing quite a lot of English on Zoom. I've had Ukrainian students, Russian students, or different nationalities wanting to learn English. And we are so lucky that English is our first language in a way. It holds us back from learning other languages, I think, but we're so lucky because there's people all over the world spending fortunes to learn English, and we just speak it and we just know it. We've never had to learn it, and it is probably the most widely spoken language in the world, as in places that you go to speak it. But of course, Spanish is the second. So, apart from Chinese, but that's because of the volume of Chinese people, So if you speak English and Spanish, you can basically go anywhere in the world and you'll make yourself understood. And you know, Spanish is a lot more of a popular language now in America, etc., all over. And as I say, my Spanish students, they're all different nationalities now. And they've all got, I mean, it's amazing. Some of the students I've had, like from Sweden, Holland, their English is so good. It's like, some of them, they speak sort of better English than I do, you know, it's like, it's just accepted in their countries that they have to learn English. It's not, you know, right from day one at school, you're learning English and that's it, you have to learn English. And I think that's something that we're lucky with in one way, that we can be understood anywhere, but it's probably holds us back as far as other languages are concerned, because we take it for granted that people will speak English to us.
I mean, another thing they're saying now is learning another language is so good for your brain health.
Exactly.
You know,
for
your brain is a
dementia.
muscle, and by learning another language, you're using different parts of the brain. And sometimes learning a language can be very frustrating. I understand that 100%. Other times you think, wow, this is really interesting, you know, in comparison between something in English and something in Spanish. So I think, you know, even if it's, you know, as a hobby, as an interest, whether you want to learn it off of YouTube or go to classes, and you're not living in Italy or France or Spain, give it a go. No.
Yeah, and another, it's true, that's exactly true. It is good for your brain health. Definitely, learning another language staves off things like dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. They're starting to see that more and more, aren't they? Prove that more and more. And also, I think another sort of extra little thing that comes from the people that come for classes rather than Zoom, they make friends, you know, in classes. You know, a lot of people, when they come to Spain, they leave all their network behind. You know, they leave their family behind, they leave their friends behind. So they come here maybe with a partner, maybe not with a partner, maybe they come alone. And they've got to build up a whole new social network. And what's been really nice over the years is a lot of the students that have come to my classes, well, some of them have become my friends, and some of them have made friends between them, you know, and even opened businesses together, or their children have become friends, or, you know, so that's this sort of little aside, you know, from Spanish classes, from learning Spanish, the social aspect of it, and, you know, building a new social network. And also you get information from, you know what, especially now when everything's so complicated with the visas and this, that and the other, people ask each other, you know, what did you do about your padron, or do you know how I go and do, and it's like a little information hub as well as just classes. So it's you can't lose, really.
So Vicki, can we talk about your YouTube channel now? How does it work in respect of the classes, and what sort of things can people learn from your YouTube channel?
Okay, well, my YouTube channel, I started probably in 2015, maybe even, but I didn't do any videos, or maybe I only did about 3 videos. Then, of course, after COVID, or during COVID and all the restrictions, I started doing a lot of, I did one of the most popular videos I'd do on a Saturday night. I would call it Lockdown with Carver, because I would get all dressed up, because of course we couldn't go out anywhere or do anything. So I'd get all dressed up with a glass of Carver and do a video, like, you know, just, it's crazy really when you think back, but, you know, we all were a little bit crazy then. And yeah, and then my subscribers jumped, it's taken 2 years, but they went from 21 that I had at the beginning of COVID, if you like, and now I have 1,852 subscribers. And On my, what do I do on my videos? Well, all my books, you know, my level 1, level 2, they're backed up on the YouTube channel. So when people, they go through the book and they come to classes, or some people don't come to classes, they learn with the book at home and the YouTube videos. But they're all backed up on YouTube, so people can listen as well as read at the same time. So all my books, the 4 books, every single bit of Spanish that's in those books is on the YouTube channel to listen to. And then I also do sort of other ad hoc videos, I suppose, like if there's well, when unfortunately the Queen died, so I did a video on royal vocabulary, or if it's Christmas, I'll do a video on Christmas in Spain, or so I do various sort of things. I also do videos to learn English, so people that are learning English as well. And yeah, and I'm always open to suggestions for people if they say to me, look, I really don't understand. In fact, one of my students said the other day, and I thought I'm going to make a video on that. What's the difference between IE, and aya and aquí? You know, some of these things that people, you know, or what's the difference between ser and estar, or when you use the preterite tense, or when do you use so I try and do a mixture of different levels, some that will suit beginners, some that will suit more intermediate, and some that will suit advanced. And yeah, if somebody has a suggestion, can you please explain this to me because I just don't understand it, I'll do a video on that. So there's 576 videos on the channel. I know that's, I saw that the other day and I thought, oh my goodness. But I probably I try and do at least one a week now, but I don't have so much time now. Obviously during COVID, I did a lot more videos because I had more time to do them.
So Vicki, if we sum up, you came to Spain with a 9-month-old baby for a week's holiday.
Yeah, a month's holiday.
No, a month's holiday. You then came and you stayed for another month and another month. Move on a few years, you've opened an academy, you've got a YouTube channel that's doing incredibly well, 500 plus videos, 4 books, and you're writing the 5th book now. You've written a book, The Confessions of a Spanish Teacher.
It sounds brilliant, doesn't it? But it's, you know, it's been a struggle. You know, living in Spain is not, and trying to make a living in Spain is not easy, as most people would know that. But yeah, yeah. Also, I have some little bilingual storybooks. I have 3 bilingual storybooks. About dogs, just silly stories really, but they're in English and Spanish, so for people if they just want to practice a little bit, you know, it's just a story and you've got the Spanish next to the English so you can follow it as it goes along.
So Vicki, one last question then. So after doing the books, the videos, the classes, etc., what do you do to relax?
What do I do to relax? Well, I walk my dogs. I have 2 dogs. Well, not in the summer, I don't. But in the winter, I like to walk with the dogs. I just normal. I go out for meals. I like socialising, going out. I like doing the YouTube videos. You know, quite often I do that. That's like an enjoyable thing that I do. It's not a chore to do it. It just, as I'm sure you know, it takes a lot more time than you would think. You know, because you have to prepare for it, and then of course. And it's not actually even making the video itself, it's then the loading it up and etc. But I do enjoy all that. So I wouldn't say I have like a hobby in the sense of like something else that I do really, but no, but yeah, walking, you know, just going out, getting some fresh air, relaxing. Sometimes I just sit and play Spider Solitaire for a couple of hours. It just depends.
You're enjoying your life here in Spain?
Yes, I do enjoy my life here in Spain. Not in July and August, really. That's not my favourite time of the year. But I think the rest of the year, yeah. I mean, Spain is a lovely place to live because it's not perfect, nowhere's perfect, and there's always things that we can find to complain about. But I think generally you have all the same problems that you would have probably if you were in the UK, but it's just in a much nicer environment, isn't it? It's just they don't feel the same somehow. You've still got to pay your bills, and we've still worry about normal things, but it's just a nice environment. And I do like the system in Spain. I mean, people complain about the system, but I like, any experiences I've ever had, touch wood, with, hospitals, doctors, and I've had a lot, because not for me, but I've been interpreter at for lots of people at hospitals, doctors, etc. I think it's a lovely place to live, and because I've seen the other side of it in the UK as well, and it's like, it's much better here, I think. But, I suppose everyone has a different experience. Maybe it's, we live in a little village, and there's some things that are good about that again and bad about that. But, I think genuinely, how could you not like living in Spain, really?
Well, Vicki, it's been such an interesting conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Particularly for me as a student of Spanish, hearing from you as a teacher all the things that I struggle with, all the things that, I'm trying to do to learn Spanish. So you've definitely motivated me to get my books out again after the summer break and get going. So Vicki, we're going to put all the links to your YouTube, to your academy, to your books, because one thing I want to try and do, I know you're based in Spain here, but you are doing classes online via Zoom. So you don't have to be in Spain. If you just want to have a go, maybe have a trial class with Vicki, just see whether you fancy learning another language, and just, as maybe a hobby, or, just to say to people, you can speak a little bit of Spanish.
Well, that's right, yeah, and especially if you've got some connection to Spain, if you come out on holiday on a regular basis, or even any other Spanish-speaking country. It doesn't have to be just Spain. If you're planning a holiday to Mexico or anywhere like that, they speak Spanish as well. So
hopefully our conversation will encourage people to have a go at learning another language, whether it's with a teacher, whether it's online with YouTube.
That's right.
Book or whatever. Have a go, particularly as you are an adult. We're not expecting you to take an exam. We're not expecting you to up sticks and move to Spain, but maybe just as a hobby, as a pastime, have a go.
And that's it. And be kind to yourself. Don't expect too much from yourself. I think that's it. Like, people get frustrated with themselves, So yeah.
Oh, Vicki, thank you so much. And we'll put all the links to your channels, your books, your academy, put everything with the podcast so people can get in touch with you. Vicki, thank you so much for being a guest on the All About You podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. Adios.
Adios.